Hi, everybody. I'm very pleased to share my views on Dr. Ambedkar with you today in the context of your literary festival and on the occasion of the release of the Malayalam edition of my biography of Dr. Ambedkar, which is now available in 7 languages: French, English, Hindi, Tamil, Marathi, Gujarati, and Malayalam. And I'm very grateful, I'm most grateful to Afif for this translation. In 10 to 15 minutes, I'm not going to summarize the book, but I'll try to decipher the logic behind Dr. Ambedkar's trajectory. And I will first look at him as an intellectual, and more precisely as a sociologist. Dr. Ambedkar spent its time and energy first to understand the caste system for fighting it more effectively. He is a scholar as much as a man of action. He is a scholar before becoming a man of action and for becoming a man of action. So the first thing he will try to understand is the mechanism of the caste system. And that is something he will do primarily in the US, in Columbia University, where he did his MA, trying to understand what kind of inequality was the caste system based on. And he had this great intuition that the variant of inequality on which the caste system is based is what he called graded inequality. And he contrasted graded inequality with what he saw elsewhere in the world, in the West. He contrasted it, first of all, with the European ancient regime, where the third state was in a position to raise against the aristocracy, against the clergy, because it was large enough. And that resulted in the French Revolution, that was such a source of inspiration for him. And he also contrasted the Indian version of inequality to the post-industrial revolution society that could generate another revolution after creating a proletariat. Well, the proletariat was sufficiently united, the working class was sufficiently large to overthrow the elite groups, as in the case of the Russian Revolution of 1917. By contrast, he says, in the graded inequality system that we have in India, the labor, the plebeians are divided. Of course, there is this big division between the Shudras and the Dalits, but within each of these blocks or categories, there are subdivisions along jati lines. And his key formula here is the caste system is not only a division of labor, it is also a division of the laborers. That's a great intuition. He had many others, but that's probably one of his most powerful intuitions, because on the basis of this intuition, he could give himself a mission to unite the Dalits and to fight for their rights. One of the best ideas he had was to ethnicize caste and say Dalits are a group, they are the broken men, they are the oppressed, and they add a culture that they need to retrieve, and that is the Buddhist culture. You know, he has this intuition that you need to find a cementing force. You have to find a culture in common across caste lines, across jati lines. And this is based on his idea that Dalits used to be Buddhist in the first place. And it's also based on the idea that they were autochthonous people. They were there before, and therefore they are legitimate rulers of the country. That's the first step in the making of Ambedkar as a public figure. He has the idea, he has the plan, he knows what he wants to do. He wants to emancipate Dalits by giving them a new identity and by fighting for their rights. And that's the second step that comes logically subsequently, to fight for political rights. So after being back from the West, after staying in the US and UK, he is in India and is interviewed by the Southborough Committee in 1919 to tell the British what kind of politics, what kind of political rights Dalits need to get. At that time, 1919, he's not so sure that a separate electorate, what he called a communal electorate, was the right solution. So before the Southborough Committee in 1919, he said, well, we can go either for reserve seats for the minorities or communal electorate. Well, 10 years later, when the Simon Commission revisited this constitutional question, he also submitted a memorandum to the British, and then he was more interested in a quota of seats for the Dalits instead of a communal electorate or a separate electorate. Partly because at that time he was probably anxious not to appear as quote-unquote a separatist, and he preferred to not sever his links with social and political mainstreams. This thing changed soon after when the Communal Award was announced in 1932. It included a separate electorate for the Dalits, and he was very much supportive of this option, an option that Mahatma Gandhi resisted, opposed. Mahatma Gandhi went on hunger strike, fastened to death in jail where he was because of the civil disobedience movement in Pune. And it's in Pune that Ambedkar had to accept what is known as the Pune Pact, or the Pune Pact, that in fact questioned the separate electorate formula and replaced it by a reserve seats system. But reserve seats were not what Ambedkar wanted as a solution for the Dalits, because in no constituency Dalits were in a majority. So the Dalits who were elected in reserve seats were elected because of the votes of non-Dalits, non-Dalit citizens. Still, Ambedkar continued to believe in political action, and soon after, he created a political party, the Independent Labour Party, in 1936. The name of the party is very revealing of his intention to fight not only for the Dalits, but for the working class at large. He was against Brahman Shahi and Banvalchai, that is against Rabbinism and against capitalism. But he did not believe in Marxism because the Marxist approach of society was based on class, and he thought that caste was the basic unit of analysis. And as I've said, he considered that caste was a division of the laborers, dividing the laboring class. Still, he wanted to go beyond his own caste group and therefore created a labor party rather than a caste-based party. Well, that did not work very well. In the 1937 elections, the Independent Labour Party did not win too many seats, and very interestingly, it was de facto a Dalit party, and even more than that, a Mahar party. There were very few non-Mahars behind him at that time. And that was a sign, a clear indication that, caste remained the most important variable. He resigned himself to this by founding in 1942 the Scheduled Caste Federation, the SCF, that was clearly a party defending the Dalits. This party did not do very well in the 1945-46 election. In fact, it could win only 2 seats, much less than in 37. And that was the second strategy that I wanted to review that did not fructify very much, flourished very much. Third, Dr. Ambedkar oriented his political activities beyond party creation in a way that he could influence the rulers, and primarily the British rulers. And this is a very interesting phase of his career. We are in the early 1940s, 1941. He joins the Defense Advisory Committee that had been set up by the Viceroy for involving the Indian leaders in the war effort. And 1 year later, he entered the Executive Council of the Viceroy as Labour member. And this action that can be seen as opportunistic is not opportunistic, but a pragmatic approach that gave good results. He worked in this capacity with the British to reforms which made a great impact on the Indian trajectory, political Indian trajectory. For instance, you had the Indian Trade Union Amendment Bill passed, and this new act made compulsory the recognition of a trade union in every enterprise, provided it fulfills certain conditions. He was also very active in defending reservations and could make reservations much more systematic in the British Raj system. To collaborate with the rulers remained his line of action when Congress formed the government, even before independence, and of course after independence, when Nehru invited him to join his government as law minister. And as law minister, he did a good job, but he did an even better job as chair of the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly. Certainly he could not prevail in each and every domain. He had to bow to Sardar Patel's authority when the question of separate electorate was raised again. He lost that battle, but he won others. And he was, of course, behind the reforms, the articles of the Indian Constitution that mattered the most, or some of those which matter the most. like Article 15, Article 15 first, that is the article that abolishes discrimination based on caste or race regarding access to shops, restaurants, hotels, public places, wells, streets, and so on. Article 17, of course, was equally important, abolishing untouchability, and beggar, which is a form of servitude, that was also declared illegal in Article 23. Well, all the articles behind the fundamental rights almost were because of him. This is when Ambedkar became a statesman. So to collaborate with the rulers bore fruit, but up to a point, and there was one concrete transformation that he longed for, and that was enshrined in the Hindu Code Bill that was introduced in the late 40s, especially equality between men and women on the question of property, inheritance. That was very dear to him. He wanted also to eliminate caste bar in the civil marriage. Well, that was too much for leaders of the Congress party, including Rajendra Prasad, the president of the Republic. And Nehru preferred to soft pedal or somewhat moderate the will of Dr. Ambedkar to move forward. That was the parting of the ways, and Dr. Ambedkar resigned from Nehru's government in 1951, September 15, 1951. That's the last political decision he made, almost, and the last phase of his strategy, so to speak, his life at least, consisted in finding an alternative religion. He was persuaded, he was convinced right from the beginning that caste is inherent in Hinduism. And that is what he had shown in his first studies. So as early as the 20s, and for sure the 30s, he was keen on converting to another religion. In 1935, he had said, "I will not die a Hindu." And more than 21 years later, in 1956, he opted for Buddhism, the religion he thought that had been the original religion of the Dalits. And in Nagpur, he converted on the 14th of October 1956 to this religion, saying, "By discarding my ancient religion, which stood for inequality and oppression, today I am reborn." He was not the only one to be reborn that way. Thousands of Dalits converted to Buddhism at the same time. And this is a decision he made a few weeks, less than 2 months, before he died on the 6th of December 1956, making it a logical conclusion. There is an implacable cohesiveness in Dr. Ambedkar's trajectory. He analyzed caste, he fought against caste politically, constitutionally, and finally, socially, sociologically, finding the religion that was an Indian religion, Buddhism, in which he could find equality and dignity. The fact that he has not been followed as much as he expected remains a mystery to me, and I'm sure there'll be more research for understanding why, as Dr. Ambedkar's recommendations and political strategy as well, to some extent failed till today, but other dimensions of his career has resulted in great achievements, and there is no doubt that reservations, positive discrimination, is one of the major successes of his political inclination. We see today a Dalit middle class, a Dalit class of intellectuals that has been made possible, that has been generated by reservations. And certainly they are the ones who need to continue, who have to continue the work he has initiated. And I will leave you with this idea after speaking more than 20 minutes when I thought I would not be so detailed, so talkative, but you can't change the intellectual and the public intellectual in particular. I leave you with this. Jai Bhim.